Hey guys, Wally here, and welcome to another video. For those of you that have been here for a bit, this is a rare sight. Consistent uploads. We don't know her. What's going on? I don't know either, but let's all just enjoy this while it lasts, shall we? Now today, I want to talk to you guys about a very important event that occurred to me a few days ago. My webcomics anniversary. Yes, that's right, my webcomic Straight D's turned 4 the other day. That means that I've been creating and sharing a comic on the internet for over 4 years now. How crazy is that? Time sure does fly by. It was just the other day when it feels like it was just the other day when I started posting Straight D's to the internet for the first time. So really, yeah, it's honestly, I'm honestly impressed with myself for having kept it up, especially when you consider what's happened over the course of these past 4 years. So yeah, I thought that as a special way of commemorating this event, it would be cool to reminisce. In other words, I really just wanted to make, I had been thinking about what I should do to celebrate the occasion. And I had been, it's kind of a tradition at this point. Well, except that one year where I was aware of the anniversary but forgot to do anything. But regardless, I always try and post something to celebrate the occasion. And well, this year, while I was very conscious of the fact that the anniversary was coming up, I couldn't come up with anything. And the day came by, and it was on that very same day that I came up with the idea of making a video to celebrate the occasion, since I've been making so many videos lately. And so now I'm rushing to try and put it out before it's kind of irrelevant. The day's already passed, but I still want to do this. And I want to talk about the subject. So yeah, here we are. Let's just get to it, right? So, back when I was finishing up my college degree, I'd been posting a series of short comics featuring two of my OCs called Danny and Darwin. These two OCs came about in a dream, believe it or not. The first few times I drew them, it was mostly to try to put on paper what I had seen in my dream, which, by the way, had been a dream about a heated argument between a couple that escalated to the point where a third party had to interfere. Now, I think that from what I remember vaguely of that dream, I think that I had been in the dream. At first, I was one of the two people having the argument, and then at one point, my perspective shifted, and I was suddenly the person that was interfering, and then at another point, I was staring at the whole thing from a bird's eye view or something. So I don't know what that was about, but the point was that I remembered the dream enough to write it down and to be curious about these characters. So the first comic featuring Danny and Darwin was actually based on that one dream. When I was starting out, I had named Danny and Darwin's comic series D&D, but as we can all know, that didn't last, as I later searched up that name and realized that said acronym had already been coined, obviously. So, scratch that. Danny and Darwin, in air quotes, that's the title. That was the title for the remainder of that era of short comics. Honestly, the title for the series didn't really matter at the time anyways, because it wasn't even a series at the time. Said comics, while they featured the same two main characters, were not supposed to be read in any particular order. It was, it wasn't supposed to be a linear comic series, just adventures and conversations between these two dudes. So it didn't really matter. But you know how comic strips have names and everything? Well, yeah, I was trying to go for something along those lines. But at the time, it just stayed as Danny and Darwin because it still has kind of a ring to it, right? So, I posted these comics, or the series of short comics, to both my Tumblr art blog and my Facebook page at the time. Though, most of the feedback that I received was from friends and family on Facebook. Tumblr wasn't really impressed. And I'm not really surprised about that either, because I probably didn't tag them properly for it to actually reach people on Tumblr other than like fandoms. So like, yeah, I don't think there was a market for like webcomics on Tumblr. Although, never mind. I can kind of probably name a few webcomics that started off on Tumblr. But anyways, regardless, I did receive really nice feedback for these comics. So I made a few more in the series, and it's all thanks to like the friends and my family that shared my comic at the time on Facebook, or just gave me feedback, or it was those nice comics that drove me to continuing the series. So after posting a few of these 6 to 10 page comics, I started thinking about how I could maybe connect these short stories and give Danny and Darwin a proper comic. A lot of the key points in their story were already there, so it was just a matter of figuring out how to connect each short story with the other. I thought that the best way to start off this comic was with the Dream comic, which touched on how our two boys met. So, if you guys haven't read Straight D's, it starts off with Danny and Darwin at the hospital at the couples therapy office. The reason as to why they are in said office is pretty unclear, so the reader is then launched back into a flashback. Now, I'm pretty sure that I took this flashback idea from a webcomic that I loved at the time called Always Raining Here by Hazel and Bell. Said webcomic also starts off in a similar manner, and I'm pretty sure that I wasn't aware of how similar my story structure was at the time. But, looking back at it now, it's clear as day, and I'm kind of embarrassed about it. But to be fair, it was my first long-term comic, and it still kind of is. And, I was really just going at it alone at the time with little to no feedback as to how to go about it. So I suppose I was just trying my best to string up all these short comics into a coherent storyline. So I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to kick off the story. I was especially troubled with how my first page was going to look. So, those posts and videos that artists often see about comic making that jokingly say that you're never going to be satisfied with your first page are 100% absolutely right. I redrew my first page so many times. It's not even funny. Like, it was such a stressful thing because obviously it's the first thing people see when they like start reading your comics. So, well, no, the cover's the first thing, but regardless of that, yeah, it's still something that I struggle with or ponder on a lot. Like I've made comics after that, and I always have to really, really think about that first page a lot. I mean, it's the first impression they get, so of course there's a lot of pressure to it, but I think it's just easier to finish it and get it out of the way. Maybe you can go back to it later, but honestly, it's just too stressful. So while I tried and figured out the general story, I also took it upon myself to populate Danny and Darwin's world with people. And by people, I mean full-fledged OCs with personality traits, occupations, drink preferences, the whole package. When it comes to character design, I just, can't hold myself back. I ended up creating like a whole cast of characters that weren't just there to fill up space and be used as plot devices for, the benefit of the main characters, so to speak. Each one of them could have been their own main character, have their own storyline, their own comic. I'm not sure if that was the best way to go about adding life to Danny and Darwin's world, but it was definitely what I knew how to do best at the time. And I'm still probably, I don't create as many OCs as I used to, but I still find it very enjoyable. I may not have been, as confident in my storytelling, but at least, I like writing dialogues, and I still kind of do. So having solid characters to play off of each other was my way of keeping my story on track. After months of planning and finally having figured out a title for my comic, Yeah, I don't want to get into the title because it hasn't been addressed yet in the actual comics. So, yeah, I don't want to spoil why Straight D's has its name. A lot of people like to joke about the fact that, haha, it's called Straight D's, but nobody's in the comic is definitely like straight or anything. Well, you're right. It is a play on words, but like, there's more to it than that. Anyway, setting that aside, after having figured out the title, I finally worked up the courage to post the first few pages of Straight D's do Tapas, or Tapastic at the time. It was February 21st, 2017, and I was feeling pretty good just because my birthday was coming up. I posted the first episode and was prepared for it to be, like a chill launch, like what I had already experienced from my Facebook and Tumblr days. Feedback, but from the people that you would expect it from. So yeah, I expected a chill launch for my comic to just be my own little thing that I share with friends, just like before. But boy, was I surprised when that wasn't the case. For whatever reason, Straight D's did a lot better than what I expected. I'm not sure if it's due to Tapas's algorithm, if my comic showed up on the front page under the new comics tab at just the right time. But the fact of the matter was that I started getting a lot of feedback right off the bat, and I don't think that's a common thing to happen unless you're like highlighted in the front page. I also posted to the most, how do I say it, to the most popular category in tapas at the time, and I think it's still pretty much the top category, which is BL or Boys Love. So yeah, I think that had a lot of, like, thinking about it now, it was probably the main reason why it got so much feedback right off the bat, because let me tell you, BL and yaoi readers, they go all in. So I honestly shouldn't be surprised. Yeah, I'll leave that at that. Needless to say that I was overwhelmed. But for anybody that had been planning a comic for months now, I was super happy with the positive reception. And so it eventually just became second nature to post weekly updates. Yeah, I kept up with it fairly easily at the time, since my college assignments, left a lot to be desired in terms of difficulty. And on the other hand, my friends were either too busy to check in or, lived too far away at the time. So, Straight D's became my main passion project and kept me sane during my internship, my graduation, and even more so when I took my first steps into the world after college. The adult world, I guess. I don't know. I remember not having any plans after graduation, except for wanting to just keep up with my comic. Yeah, it's not. It leaves a lot to be desired. Like, I really did step out of college with no idea what to do. Nothing really else caught my eye. Even if there were study paths that could have, that I would have loved to pursue, they just seemed too far out of reach. And also, none of them, like, felt attractive enough for me to actually, like, want to pursue higher studies. Do I regret that decision? Kinda, but I'm just kind of still, or I was too indecisive about what to keep on studying. So it didn't feel like it was worth it to just go in and choose another, keep going on that path when I was so uncertain myself. So during that time of uncertainty where I just worked freelance and tried to find my place in the world, Hurricane Maria happened. And this is where the real struggles started. Because how exactly are you expected to find work when your country has been slaughtered by a Category 5 hurricane? Yeah, I think it was 5. 5 when it passed by. How was anybody supposed to keep up with their life plans when you were just struggling to, live? Needless to say that the online presence that I had been steadily building up was thrown out the window. And you know what, that's fine, that's okay. Because really I was just happy to be alive at the time. Um Nothing really else mattered except for me and my family's safety. So that was that, I guess. Eventually, though, comic updates started back up. For some time, I had to go and live with my older sister and her partner in Illinois. So during that time, I threw myself into comic making, trying to make up for the time that I had lost, even though it was obviously not my fault. I had no way of predicting this, and it was out of my hands, outside forces. So, but I still, fully dedicated my time to updating Straight D's. Sometimes going as far as to updating double the amount of pages that I usually did, and posting Q&As and working on that. Yeah, I tried to make up for what time I had not been around, scared of people just losing interest in my comic, probably. Anyways, while I was living in that small town in Illinois, though, um, I think that time while I was there, I was actually able to, how do I say it, perfect or work a little bit more on Stray D's world. So in the end, when I came back from my experience while living in another state, I think I took a lot of the sites and places from that small town with me, and I later used them as reference for future locations in the comic. So the few times that people have asked me if Straight D's is based on a real place or if it takes place in a real location, I tend to just answer that it's based on that one small town in Illinois, because it kind of just works with what I had in mind, because it was a small college town with a lot of different cultures meshing together. Because of the college, you got a lot of people from abroad coming in. So yeah, I kind of like that dynamic, and it really did fit with what I had in mind for Straight D's. Otherwise, I would have said that it took place in Puerto Rico, which is my home country, but I don't know if it makes any much more sense considering the cast of characters. I mean, Danny would fit right in, obviously, and Darwin, obviously, as well, but yeah, I don't know. I've never pictured Straight D's to be, set in Puerto Rico. Not really. So yeah, the year after that was basically just a continuation. It was just me trying to find a more permanent job, but not really committing because I wasn't even sure about what I actually wanted career-wise in the first place. And while I loved working for myself, I couldn't help but feel a sort of pressure to provide and to fit into the societal mold that was expected of me. So, by the end of 2018, when I had just been rejected by a local group of comic creators, I just basically jumped on the next part-time job offer that I got. At the time, I just thought that I was finally taking a step in the right direction. So I was good and done, except that that job offer resulted in actually a full-time job, which led to me neglecting Straight D's and all the other comics that I had been working on at the time, which eventually led to me just being utterly depressed. So, during 2019, I struggled a lot with establishing an upload schedule for my comics. I struggled to maintain what I had already established on top of my now full-time job. At the end of the previous year, I had jumped the gun and I had published a second comic to Tapas named Pythagoras' Flower, and on top of that, a slice of life comic strip series called Taking Notes. So, before the job offer, I genuinely believed that I was going to be able to keep up with all of this, and that I would be able to later on showcase all of my cool stuff on a comic book convention later in the year. But obviously, the job came out of nowhere. I mean, it didn't come out of nowhere. I obviously applied to the job, but I didn't actually think I was gonna, get the job. So I had just gone ahead with my life. I think that from what I remember from my New Year's resolutions for 2019, I had just been planning on trying to apply to more like art conventions and everything. But I was already feeling that pressure that I already mentioned. So it was like a sort of trial year, or like the last chance that I was giving myself to actually like pursue this art career. Like I was really hoping for that convention to go well and everything. So the job thing happened, and it obviously just didn't fit in with my original plans. Like honestly, what was I expecting? Like a minimum wage job that wasn't going to work me to the bone. It's like I gained something, but like I gained life experience, but I lost a whole year of my art career. So honestly, I don't know if I regret it or not. So yeah, keeping up with updates was just a constant struggle. I was obviously only able to work on one comic at the time, and there were times with that when that comic wasn't straight D's. During this year, 2019, I started feeling the pressure of working on a long-term comic, and I struggled with motivation constantly. I found that switching it up by working on other stories like Pythagoras' Flower, helped me refuel my love for storytelling and comic making. So I didn't really feel the joy of creating, not until at least half the year had gone by, when I actually like started preparing for that comic convention. It was my convention debut. Yeah, basically my comic convention debut as an artist, so to speak. So that was Puerto Rico Comic Con 2019. And let me just say, it was just so fucking fun. Like, it was everything I had ever wished for as a creator and more. Just seeing people actually take interest in my work, but in person, needless to say that I was over the moon and back. Hands down, this was like the highlight of my year and one of the proudest and happiest moments of my life. Funny thing is, I printed just a mere 3 copies of the first chapter of Straight D's and like several copies of a Pythagoras' Flower preview that I had been working on during that year. I like the minimum. I printed the minimum. I think less than the minimum. Not really thinking that people would actually want to own physical copies of my work. Like my goal for such convention was to encourage people to go and read my comic online. Like, my comic is free to read, and I wanted to be as transparent about said fact, like, as much as possible to the people that stopped by my booth. So it was really just a marketing tool for me, like just being there and talking about my comic. It was just to try and fuel and encourage people to go and read the comic. I had never thought that there would be people that actually wanted to buy the comic. Like, that was unfathomable. Like, I couldn't even think, like, it wouldn't, like, the thought never crossed my mind. That's it. So, like, when I was bought out, like, I ran out of merch and stuff. Like, not only my physical, my comic copies and zines, those ran out pretty quickly, but also all my prints and all the extra stuff that I have like brought with me, everything. I sold out basically everything, and I was just so fucking happy, so elated. Like I said, it was the best and most like unforgettable experience. One of the best moments of my life, for sure. Like, it's ridiculous, honestly. It was just the greatest. I can't wait to go to conventions again. Yeah, I don't know. It's gonna be a while. Like, I'm just gonna be so fucking ecstatic when I can do that again. Like, it was such a rush. After that, experience at Comic-Con, the rest of the year basically sucked. Like, I'm not gonna get into it. Just to sum it up, it sucked. And by the time that 2020 came around, I was more than ready to disappear off the face of the earth. Like, I had been having pretty frequent panic attacks at work due to stress and other things that I'd rather not mention. So I welcomed quarantine with open arms. Open arms. I'm opening my arms right now. There's not much else to say about 2020 apart from that. Like, last year just granted me the time to recover and rediscover myself. And I think that's apparent in my comics. Like, I don't know. There were times during 2019 where I was just posting out of sheer guilt because I hadn't been updating that long. And every time I updated, I wrote in the description, like, excuses and everything. But really, I had just been unmotivated. Like, work was dragging me under. Like, I just couldn't really, I couldn't find motivation to create anymore. And that was just rekindled during last year. Yeah, like, that's it. That's basically what happened last year. And so now, here we are, 2021. Finally, we're back to present day. I apologize for the long-winded story, but I wanted to do it with straight D's as a center point because it's really been one of the main things, of the main constants in my life these past 4 years. 4 or 5 years if you count 2016 where I was thinking about it all, you know? Straight D's has changed a lot since it started. That's for sure. I've rewritten a lot of the original storyline. The comic has grown with me and reflects how I've shaped up over the years, like, for sure. What it started off as, you know, a mere boys' love comic when I anonymously shared my queerness and insecurities back in 2017 has grown up to what I hope is an okay LGBTQ story. What I hope, because I wouldn't want to go back and rewrite the comic despite all the flaws that it has and despite so many things and details that I would change to make it more inclusive, to get a better story out of it, some twists and turns and revelations that came about, certain decisions that I made at the time as I tried to tie everything up together or make things more spicy. Like, yeah, there are a lot of things I would change about straight D's. It's funny I mentioned this because every time I share my comic with a friend, I always reiterate that it gets better as the story progresses. I do this because, to me, when I look back at those first few chapters, it's just so fucking apparent where my head was at the time. Like, Darwin's bisexuality, his struggles with his career, Danny's sexual desires, and, you know, the secondary cast's struggles. Everything, like, to me, everything just points back to me when I read through it. Like, it's just scary. It's scary how much of myself I put into this comic. So, would I want to change stuff? No. Are there stuff that I would definitely change, that I should change to make it a better story? Yes. But, you know, while Straight D's is not even close to perfect, it would always hold a special place in my heart. I've learned a whole lot from the feedback that I've received from readers over the years, and also from loved ones. And I try and have tried to work towards making it into a comic that I can be proud of. I don't know if I've succeeded. Well, I am proud of it, but I don't know if I've succeeded in bettering the flaws that it had at the start. But I think that's the beauty of webcomics, you know? You learn as you post sometimes. I mean, in a perfect world, that's not the case, but to me, as this is my first long-term comic, it's been a learning experience, like, hands down. So, nearing the end of this, thanks for sticking by me. To everyone that's taken the time to read Straight D's and my other comics, whether you were there since the Facebook days or you just discovered me through this video on YouTube, I thank you for taking the time to give my stories a chance. I probably wouldn't have made it this far if I had been working on this on my own. Like, it's thanks to being able to get feedback and constant reassurance really made the difference. Like, you guys have been a great help. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. Straight D's will probably keep on going for at least 2 more years. I don't want to set any goals because I've learned that those just never work out for me. But the story is reaching its climax. Well, I would say that the chapter that we're currently on is kind of like the climax without getting any, or I wouldn't say climax. Like, it's back to English class, but where you have to like determine the climax of the story, and you just, I don't know. I don't know. Is this falling action? I don't know. The point is, it's like at a critical point in the story. And after this chapter that we're currently on, there's probably 2 more chapters left. I'm not sure how long it'll take me to reach the finish line, but I'm honestly not that concerned about it. I'm trying not to worry about it. Again, not trying to set impossible goals and put pressure on myself, because at the end of the day, I'm just creating this mostly because I, above everybody else, want to see Danny and Darwin's story. I want to give it a proper ending, and that's it, you know. So yeah, thank you for listening. I planned on giving advice on comic making on the same video, but I think it's already a pretty long video as it is. So I'll probably be doing that in another video at a later time. If you guys are interested in that, though, please consider subscribing or telling me in the comments below. You can also just leave a comment. Let me know if you've been a reader of Straight D's or if you're just gonna go and read it now. You can also just leave a like. You can also just share the video around. That would be great. Maybe check out my Patreon. Or hey, you know, imagine you do all of the above. That'd be crazy. Anything really helps, you know. Do what you like. I'm just happy to be here. And I'll probably see you guys again soon. So yeah, take care of yourselves.